Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Gabor Lukács. I'm the president of Air Passenger Rights, and this is our Sunday, weekly or bi-weekly update on passenger rights, live question and answer session. I'm going to wait just to see from my team of wonderful volunteers whether the audio and video is good, and I'm being told that we are doing fine. We are going to start momentarily. I have to start, as always, with mentioning that all this work here is being supported by a number of volunteers, and without them this could not happen. And I'm referring here to Dominic, to Martin, to Terry, and to Christine, who have been supporting the work of this group in the past many weeks. I guess now we're 9th or 10th week since this pandemic started, and we are very, very grateful to them. I'm starting to see that people are picking up, and yes, Diana, I did get a haircut. It was actually all homemade. I didn't leave my house for it. So as we say in my family, I guess I was hit by a lawnmower. That's really what happened. And I think that we should probably be starting very soon. I'm just looking at the numbers. I guess when it's such a beautiful sunny day, at least here in Nova Scotia, it's really nice and sunny. Probably many of you prefer to go out and not watch this, which I completely understand. So I think that as we are progressing, the numbers are going to pick up. I would like to start with talking about some of the successes and the setbacks of the past week. In the past week, we have seen around Thursday a significant peak in media interest. The Toronto Star published an editorial essentially calling on the government to step in. The Toronto Star editorial clearly had some effect, and it wasn't coming out of the blue. There were similar news items from Global News, some from CTV as well, from CBC about the issue of chargebacks. So it was probably in part a coincidence that it happened on Thursday, but maybe we should backtrace a little bit in time to understand what happened. The Bloc Québécois member of parliament posed a question to Transport Minister Marc Garneau earlier this week about the issue of refunds. Actually, not even a single question, but many questions. He was doing what I would call a very good, efficient cross-examination of Transport Minister Marc Garneau on his ideas of what is actually happening. And Transport Minister Marc Garneau's answers were unsatisfactory. He was humming and hawing and avoiding the question of how passengers are actually going to get back their money. As a result, very shortly thereafter, the same member of parliament posted a petition on Parliament's website. And I would like to post also a link to that because I think that that petition is still growing and it is having a great effect. So I'm just posting it right now, hopefully. And I would encourage everyone who hasn't signed that petition yet to sign it. So that petition went from a couple hundred signatures to a couple tens of thousands of signatures in matters of about 24 hours or so. Last time I checked, we were around 20-some thousand signatures, and it keeps growing. That item was also picked up by the media, by the National Post as well. So we got a bit of a momentum. And then on Thursday, also during the daily briefing, Prime Minister Trudeau was asked by CTV reporters and also some Quebec reporters what on earth is happening with the passengers' refunds. And again, he was humming and hawing and not really giving any straight answers. That is probably what happened, and it was the most important event that happened in the past week in terms of public relations. All those efforts that we have been making for weeks now to comment during Trudeau's weekly updates on social media and to not let this story to be forgotten apparently had some effect. Now the media is paying attention and some politicians are paying attention and are willing to somewhat champion this cause. This is very good and news, and it's important progress that we have made. So I love to see this choir of people who all say that they signed. That's wonderful. The more people sign it, the more people are conveying to the government that what they are trying to do is unacceptable, the better. The government can ignore a few people. They certainly can and will likely ignore when it is only just me cautioning politely that what they're doing is wrong. But they cannot ignore tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Canadians all demanding fairness, all demanding that the government enforce the basic fundamental rules of doing business, of contract law, of consumer law. So we are making progress. In terms of actual effect, let's just remember it in terms of the timelines. All these events, the major news items, were happening on Thursday. Less than 24 hours later, WestJet began to email people that they are giving refunds for US-bound flights. I don't think it's a coincidence. WestJet is doing that, of course, because the US Department of Transportation made it perfectly clear that they have no sense of humor. They made it clear that WestJet has to comply with the rules, and I suspect/hope that they are going to make it clear also to other airlines. I would like to mention also that I just recently heard from someone who was refunded also by Porter. As I recall, it was also a US-bound flight. So we are waiting, of course, to see what happens with Swoop and with Air Canada, but it seems that something is moving. At least south of the border, they understand that not issuing refunds undermines public confidence, not only in the airlines, not only in the travel industry, but in the entire system, in the entire system of capitalism or of consumerism. And they want to maintain that type of regime. They don't want to have a different regime, and therefore they understood that it is way cheaper to ensure that the passengers get their refunds than to upset the whole system. In terms of other airlines, what we need to talk about also is Air Canada's recent change in its voucher policy. Air Canada issued also, less than 24 hours after the major media attention, a statement that it is now allowing vouchers to be transferable and vouchers will not be expiring. And vouchers can also be converted at some premium to air miles or air miles to airplane points. Don't let those things fool you. They are now trying to make the theft of your money more palatable, to appear it more as if you were getting something in return. But the fact remains that until such time as you receive the refund to your original form of payment, these airlines are stealing your money. They are holding on to your property, your money, without any lawful authorization, without any color of right to your money. You paid good money for traveling, and they didn't provide the services. Therefore, you are entitled to get back that money. Gaspar is asking, how can Canadian Airlines get away with not issuing refunds? Well, they can get away with it because the government is assisting the airlines to get away with it. If the government were actually upholding the rule of law, they would have already been issuing fines. They would have already told the airlines that if they are not meeting their financial obligations, they are going to be nationalized. The government would be able to assume control over airlines under Section 47 of the Canada Transportation Act if they had the will to do so. The problem is that they don't have the appetite for it. I mean, just think about it. Would you want to mess with the business of your cousin? Probably not. That's how the government feels about the airlines. Like, as it stands, there seems to be a very cozy, incestuous relationship between the government and the airlines, and it shows. The bigger question is, and that's the question that I would like to encourage you to explore, is who are going to be your alternatives in the next election? The current government is clearly not serving the interest of passengers. That's obvious. But that's not enough. We need to have alternatives. And when I'm looking at the political map, we do have the bloc, which, first of all, you cannot vote for them if you don't live in Quebec. Many of you may not feel comfortable voting for them because of their stance on other issues. And it may not be your preferred political party. So we have the NDP, where you may remember we had a very nice 90-minute broadcast with Nikki Ashton, Member of Parliament, the transportation critic. But I wonder what more we could hear from the NDP on this issue. So far, I was surprised to see how the bloc was really stealing the show for the NDP and managing to get all the limelight, all the attention over this very important issue. And the bloc is perfectly right about this. But I was surprised to see that the NDP was not taking more activism, more leadership on this topic. And then we come to the Conservative Party, it's the CPC, where we have seen Erin O'Toole make some statements. We have also heard some weak statements from Todd Doherty. We have not seen much from Kelly Block, who was their transportation critic, So I think that your homework for the coming week, if I may be so bold, is to phone your local MPs. It doesn't matter whether they are Liberal, Conservative, NDP, or Bloc, or Green, which I should mention the Green Party has also been taking a strong position on this issue. I forgot them, unfortunately, and I apologize. But whoever is your local MP, phone their offices, email them, and don't just send them a template email. Ask for an appointment with your Member of Parliament. You are a Canadian, you are a constituent, you vote for these people, so if you tell them you want to speak to them, they have to make themselves available to you. They cannot just say, well, sorry, I'm too busy. I would very, very strongly encourage all of you to exercise your democratic right as a Canadian citizen to speak to your elected representatives. They are the people who ultimately have to hold the government accountable for their inaction, and you have to explain to these people that you don't care what the airlines are saying because it's your money. Just because the airlines are in a bad situation doesn't mean that they somehow have a priority over those Canadians who may have difficulties getting groceries, paying their utilities, paying their bills, paying their mortgages, or in the case of small business owners, paying salaries to families that depend on them. It is not the consumer's responsibility to look after the financial viability of private corporations. If there are serious problems with airlines, perhaps the airline should be nationalized, or the government should assume equity position in the company, which is what happened in Germany. And Lufthansa got a significant government bailout, but also gave in exchange 25.1% of equity. I'm moving now to a little bit of questions here. We should be getting interest on the money they are holding from us. And Sherry, I very much agree with you. And indeed, in the class action, they are seeking interest as well. It's one of the many things that will be sought. And obviously, of course, you wonder how much interest is available on the current interest rates. But what has to be remembered here that this is not a voluntary loan, rather it's something which is being forced on the public. So I also have here a question from Samantha. What about international laws from the country you were traveling to and from, for example, Mexico? Samantha, I'm not familiar with Mexico's laws. I'm familiar with the European laws, but in Mexico, I don't know how their consumer protection laws work exactly. If you can get your airline to be fined or otherwise prosecuted in another country, go for it. The more pressure we can mount, the better. The message that I think we need to deliver to the airlines, and I think so far we are managing quite well, is that this is not going to go away. This is not going to blow over. Canadian passengers are not pushovers. We're not gamblers. We are consumers. We did not pay the airlines money for the sake of gambling with it and them paying it out as dividends to their shareholders. We paid in exchange for services we didn't receive. And because we are not gamblers, airlines are not like a horse race. They have to give back the money, dollar to dollar. Pat is also asking, given what you are just now saying, my question is, why no court case has been undertaken to challenge the position of the airline, CTA, and the government? Pat, there are many court cases ongoing, so please be assured there are numerous court cases. The airlines are facing a total of 3 class actions in Canada, 2 against the 5 major airlines and 1 against international airlines. So there are court cases already, and we are going to talk about it under the class action updates. There are some slow progress there. We also challenged Canadian Transportation Agency's non-binding statement, which the airlines are trying to misrepresent as if it was binding. And we'll get to that just in a moment about the update. Andrew is also asking, what do you do if you have bought flights from Air Canada to San Diego departing June 27th, return July 31st, and Air Canada has indicated flights to San Diego have been cancelled in June 30th? Air Canada told me to reach out to Hopper. I did 2 weeks ago and haven't heard anything back. Ticket bought through Amex. Amex is a whole problem, and I think we will need to deal with Amex in a quite firm way, possibly by mass cancellation of cards and refusing to pay the bill. I mean, Amex is a whole separate issue. They are really not paying by the book. We have to deal with them in due course, but generally we have to play it by the book. So Air Canada no longer operates the flights, Andrew, your flight, that you paid for. Therefore, you are entitled to a refund. They are not transporting you to your destination, even though it would be possible to transport you. There is no government regulation prohibiting them from transporting you to San Diego. So they owe you a full refund. If they refuse, just initiate a chargeback on the basis of services not received. If Amex is giving you a hard time, we are going to take a fight with Amex. If necessary, I would also seriously consider just withholding payment for Amex, making sure that Amex understands that this is an illegitimate charge, you don't accept it, and if Amex wants you to pay it, guess what? They have to take you to court. And you need to bear in mind that the credit cards will loathe to take consumers to court because it looks bad, B, it's not economic. You know, for recovering a couple hundred or maybe a couple $1,000s, they may end up spending way more money for the collection efforts. And they cannot even do much of the usual collection efforts if you are constantly and clearly disputing the charges. It's not like, oh, I admit that I owe that money, but I'm just ignoring it. No, every turn, every week, every email, you make it clear, I don't recognize this as a valid charge. This is an illegitimate charge. I didn't receive any goods in it or service in exchange of it. I don't accept it. You know, once you do it as a kind of mantra, their only choice then is to get a judgment against you if they can, but a judge will not force you to pay for something that you didn't receive. That's quite obvious. Peter Lynch is asking, will government take over Air Canada if they go bankrupt? Well, that certainly would be a possibility. Actually, what I would be inclined to say, but of course I'm not the government, is that airlines that refuse to issue refunds should be nationalized. Not just take over, but simply nationalized. Take all the assets, take everything they have, and the shareholders will get nothing. That should be the threat made by the government to airlines whose shareholders are not willing to ensure that passengers are being paid. If there is a bankruptcy, it wouldn't be a bankruptcy actually. It would be a CCAA, a Companies Creditors Arrangements Act type of proceeding. It's a restructuring process supervised by a judge. And it would not be pleasant, but the people who would end up holding the bag would be the investors, the corporate creditors, and not the passengers. So investors are investing money in an airline with the expectation of a profit, and they assume a calculated risk. So they have to hold the bag when things go south. They cannot. What is unacceptable and what we are seeing happening now is that airlines are trying to socialize losses while they have privatized profits. Pat Agar is asking, even the conservatives are now buying into the airline position that vouchers are acceptable refund method. Well, Pat, it's a very troubling situation with the Conservative Party, and I would suggest that if you have a Conservative MP, give them a call and tell them, look, perhaps I will be voting NDP if you don't change your position. If you have a Conservative EDA, if they don't have a Conservative MP in your riding, have a chat with their EDA, the Electoral District Association, and tell them, look, your positions are unacceptable to me. We are not happy with what the Liberal government is doing, obviously, but if you would like to have a fighting chance to get my vote, you guys have to move on this. So you need to make it clear that this involves lots of money. This is something very, very important to you, and then they're going to listen. Zio is asking, before taking you to court, don't they go to collection agencies and shoot down your credit score? Zio, it's not so simple. You see, a collection agency cannot just harass you for a debt that you dispute. The simple answer to the collection agency is, I dispute this claim. I don't recognize it as a valid claim. And if you have a problem with it, take me to court. The collection agencies are normally for situations where you acknowledge that you owe them money, or you're just kind of trying to skirt it, or kind of being evasive. They cannot harass you. I mean, just imagine if it worked that way. I decided that you owe me $1,000. I go to a collection agency and give them a rug that say, I believe Zio owes me $1,000. That doesn't create a right for a collection agency to start bothering you. Same thing applies to the credit score. If they report anything to your credit reporting agency, you can have it corrected. And the point is that as long as it is disputed, it is a report in bad faith. They know that you are disputing the amount. It is not that you agreed that you didn't pay without a word, but rather you have a valid dispute with them, and they have to deal with it through the court. They cannot just unilaterally decide that you are delinquent without a court order. It could harm you. If they get a court order, then of course I would pay. But the point is, you need to force them to take it to court, because once it is in court, their nonsense will not fly. There's no judge in the right mind would accept that you have to pay for something that you receive nothing in exchange. That's not part of the contract. That's not part of the terms and conditions. They fail to properly process your chargeback. It will become quite obvious. Sai is asking, what about Sunwing? I read the TVA news clip on this site, and someone commented that since Sunwing is big business in Quebec, to watch for them to change their voucher terms. That's an interesting possibility. I hope that the Quebec consumer activists will be able to put more pressure on the businesses, on the airlines, on the travel agencies, on the tour operators. It is yet to be seen. Louis Crosby is asking, I have a flight that was cancelled with Air Canada from Anchorage to Vancouver. My Toronto to Vancouver has not been cancelled, and Vancouver to Toronto not cancelled. I bought a whole trip, not a partial. Do I have a right to a full refund? So if one segment of your flight is cancelled, of your itinerary is cancelled, then everything is cancelled. An itinerary is a single contract. It's not like, okay, I'm going to somehow to teleport from A to B, and then from a connecting point I will continue. That's not how things work, and there's no basis for that. Tanis is asking, wondering if we have number of successful chargebacks. No, we don't. It's very hard to collect statistics, and it's because people don't always report back when things go well or wrong, and it is still too early to see. We have seen a few reports where people just recently, this past week, where people reported, oh, this is now final. I was told it's a final success, but I've not always seen it. It varies. So we'll have to keep fighting, and keep in mind, we are not done with the fight until the fight is over and we won. Jeremy is asking, Amex kicks out my dispute that I paid already. What if take cash advance equal to the same disputed amount? Jeremy, I'm not sure if I would take a cash advance. That's also a possibility. I would simply, if the dispute amount is $1,000, I would simply spend down $1,000 to the dot. And if you owe a little bit more, make sure that you don't leave without paying anything but the $1,000. Say that they have charged you inappropriately for. Canceling the card is a good idea. It send a message to them that you no longer want to do business with them. I would clearly state while you're recording the call that you are not putting up with it and that you're disputing their position. So the key is that you never acknowledge owing the money. You keep disputing it in a very, very clear term and tell them, well, if you think I owe this money, here's the address of the courthouse, sue me. Ellie B is asking, I initiated a chargeback in MasterCard 3 weeks ago. No issues, but they did not ask me for any supporting documents and said they would contact me if they needed it. I have heard nothing from them since. Flight dates just passed, May 16th. Recommend I sit and wait patiently or check in and see what the status is. LB, I would probably after 3 weeks give them a call. I'm sure they gave you a dispute number and follow up based on dispute number. Now, Neonam is asking, what do you do if you bought a ticket from KLM in January? Flight was cancelled by KLM. I requested full cash refund on March 13th. Flight was supposed to leave May 21st and return June 16th. I have still not heard anything from KLM. I have called and sent many messages to KLM, but no update on my request. I also started a chargeback from my Visa C credit card. Can you recommend any other direction I should take? I think the chargeback is the way to go. I mean, that's quite okay. Christine Melville is asking, I've noticed you are asking for dollar amount from those of us with chargeback. Do you want dollar amounts before settlement or after the dispute is finalized? I'm not sure what dollar amount you are referring to. I don't think I was asking for that. I'm not sure, Christine, what you're referring to. If you feel like you want to report it, basically just state how much you got back. It's really helpful because then we can compile some data from it. But so far, I don't think I was specifically asking for dollar amounts. I think now I'm going to move on perhaps to our next topic, which is the ruling we got from the Federal Court of Appeal this Friday. So let's see. I'm going to now show you. This is the reasons, and of course, this have already been posted on the website. It's being shared. And I just want to calm down Marianne that airlines cannot blacklist you for doing chargeback. Chargeback is a legitimate process. So this is the decision we got this Friday. This is, you can see here, let me just make sure that I'm switching here to the right mode. So right there, okay. So this is by the judge, Justice Mactavish, and by this citation, likely you will be able to find it on Canly very shortly if it's not already there. And so in the first few paragraphs, the court just lays out the general context that the Canadian Transportation Agency issued two public statements that suggested it could be reasonable for airlines to provide passengers with travel vouchers. And then the court recognizes us as an advocacy group advocating for rights of public who travel by air. This is something quite nice. And then we commence an application to of the public statement that it violates the own code of conduct and misleads passengers. And the court provides here some background and summarizes our arguments, and then gets to the legal analysis of whether we have raised a serious issue and the court found that with this low threshold, the court will assume that we satisfied the injunctive test for enjoining CTA from dealing with complaints on the basis of reasonable apprehension of bias. Then the court goes on and deals with our motion, or which we're asking to also have the misleading statements removed from the CTA's website. So just maybe need to backtrace that we are dealing here not with whether passengers are actually owed refunds, but rather with having the CTA's misleading statement simply removed from the website and having the CTA basically declared to have a reasonable apprehension of bias because of what they already stated. And then the judge goes on to say that she doesn't believe that we have a strong prima facie case, that because she believes that it is not amenable to judicial review. So somehow the judge formed the view that regardless of how misleading the statement might be, it cannot be reviewed by the court. So it's not that she agrees or disagrees with it, rather that it simply cannot be reviewed by the court. And she reached this conclusion based on two very important parts that I think in some way may be helping you in a different context in terms of what the airlines are trying to argue when you do chargebacks. Because the first point that the court is making, that as a general principle, the CTA policy documents are not binding on it as a matter of law. So we are talking here about judicial recognition of the fact this is not something legally binding. And the second judicial recognition here is that the court found that the impugned statements cannot be said to affect rights, impose legal obligation, or cause prejudicial effects on either APR or airline passengers. Now, whether we agree or disagree with it is a different matter, but the point is that if an airline now tries to argue that somehow based on those statements they don't owe you an actual refund, then here's the response. The judge of the country found that this has no effect. So with all those credit card disputes, we should consider the possibility of actually proactively relying on this as a full response to any kind of claim that is based on a voucher. There's one more thing I would like to mention here, which I found quite interesting and something, as you would say, to put in the hopper to give it a bit more thought, which is the court found that there is no evidence that members of the CTA were involved in the formulation of the statement or that they have endorsed them. So it creates a really awkward situation where it sounds like perhaps some bureaucrats at the CTA came up with this statement without actually being endorsed by the members, by the actual decision makers, which again, I'm finding it quite perplexing. It would be an understatement to say it's perplexing, but if we take it for a face value, then it raises questions of, okay, are the airlines actually relying on a statement that has not even been endorsed by the members, and are they actually passing it off to the credit card companies and to passengers as if it was some kind of legally binding document? In terms of so of course, just as I mentioned before, the ultimate outcome was that the order, I'm going to go back here, that the court dismissed this motion, but this is not the end of the road. So this was the ultimate outcome. The motion was dismissed. But this was, we need to put it in context. This was a motion for a temporary injunction. The purpose was to get something temporarily until the merits of the case can be heard by a 3-judge panel. So we are not at the end of the road yet. This decision can also be appealed with leave to the Supreme Court of Canada. That's always a possibility. A link to the reasons have already been posted in the group. It is also posted. There's a whole big website for all documents, docs.airpassengerrights.ca. So if you go there, you can actually go under Federal Court of Appeal, and you can find there this case by the case number. The case number was A-102-20, and based on that, you can actually look things up. So you can read the whole reasons. Certainly, we're now just getting through it very quickly. But the bottom line is that this is not the end of the road. This is a setback for sure. Of course, I'm very disappointed with the outcome, because I think that the CTA statement should have come down, because the CTA continues to mislead Canadians, continues to mislead consumers. And that should not be allowed in a democratic society. But we will have to see how to go further from here. Certainly, we are going to continue to fight this fight. This is not over whatsoever. This is not over at all. I would also like to come to a related point, which we already mentioned, which is the U.S. Department of Transportation has issued a second kind of, it wasn't an enforcement notice, it was an FAQ to what they have already issued. And I think it would be helpful for us to read through it and understand. This was something that was issued on May 12th, so just a couple of days ago. And we should have a look at that as well. Pat Aguirre is asking on what you are talking about at the moment. However, certain airlines are using that they can only provide vouchers because it's in accord with CTA. So the airlines continue to break the law. There's no question about it. I just would like to make sure that before we go here to answer this question, airlines continue to break the law. There's no question about it, but it doesn't make it legal. So it may take us longer to get back our money, but ultimately, as far as our goal is concerned, these airlines and their executives who have been involved in this type of conduct will have to be held accountable. They will have to be brought to justice for their unlawful behavior, their conduct. That's not a brainer. It's quite obvious. So it may take longer. It may take some more public outcry. There may need to be a parliamentary inquiry into what happened here. Dave is asking, have you considered that maybe Trudeau's government ordered the CT to take that policy position? And you know, Dave, it's quite possible that the government picked up the phone and told the CTA to issue this statement. I wouldn't put it beyond them. Of course, we don't have any evidence either way. We can only speculate about that. What is clear that this statement came from somewhere, and that has to be figured out where it came from. That's another no-brainer. What I'm finding so troubling is that the government is saying, oh, the CTA, they are an independent party, they are independent tribunal, they are not us. So the government is using the CTA as a kind of smokescreen to avoid political moral responsibility for this decision. Well, it's really one way or another, it is the government's responsibility. And the government does have the necessary tools to intervene here. They could step in, they could issue policy directives to the agency, they have all the tools, but they're not using it because then they can be held accountable for it. And the current government is certainly focusing on avoiding any possible accountability and blaming everything on the CTA and claiming that the CTA is independent. So that's where we are right now. As for the US, I mentioned earlier that in the US, unlike in Canada, they don't have a sense of humor to delinquent airlines. And so this is a second statement they have issued on this matter. A couple items of interest. In the US, they typically receive 1,500 complaints per month, but now in March and April, they received more than 25,000 complaints. So certainly, in the US, things are hitting the fan as well. And I would like to mention in this context that when we see progress in Canada, it is because of the complaints that you are making to the DOT. I suspect the reason that there are so many, because there are so many complaints from Canada to the DOT, Department of Transport, that's the reason I believe that WestJet has began to issue some refunds for flights to and from the US, because I suspect that they got an informal phone call from the DOT telling them, guys, you cannot do this. Simon is asking, should we make a ATIP request? Yeah, and then access to information request would be a great idea. The question is how long it will take them to process it. With those access to information requests, they can really mess you up very badly. They can take months and months, and even if your request is small, if they don't want to provide something, they will likely stall it for years. Ultimately, you will discover that there was something inappropriate. But I think that looking into an access to information request would be well advised in this context. Kirsten is asking, the airlines are breaking the law. Is there a legal venue to enforce the airlines to fulfill their obligations? One of the legal venues is the U.S. Department of Transportation, and that's what we are looking at their statement now. The other is the class action, which I also have some updates on that, so we're going to talk about it in a moment. Now, here they asked, in this statement, they're asking 6 or 7 questions. The first question is, what rights do passengers have if an airline cancels a flight or makes a significant change? What is a significant change in cancellation requiring a refund? So they reinforce here the fact that they have to provide refunds and that the passengers don't have to accept alternatives, but they acknowledge that significant change or cancellation is not defined. So they are somewhat deferring here to the terms and conditions of the airlines, what cancellation and significant change means. But it's quite clear that if a flight doesn't operate, it means that that the flight was canceled. So I would it's a bit of a precision that they are bringing into these rules, into these guidances, but I wouldn't be too concerned about it. The second question is, what rights do passengers have if the passengers choose not to travel? And the DOT clarifies that passengers who purchase non-refundable tickets are not entitled to a refund or travel voucher if they cancel themselves. This is under the US regulatory regime. This has nothing to do with other rights of passengers under frustrated contracts. They are here talking only about the rights under the US regulatory regime. But they're also cautioning, there's a little bit of cautionary word here, that in reviewing complaints, they will closely examine any allegations that the passenger were misled about the status of a flight. So if airlines are trying to mess around, I don't think they are going to get too far with it. Next question is, what rights do passengers have if they purchased a ticket from an online travel agency? And this is also very, very, very consumer friendly, the way they come down here, that ticket agents are required to make proper refunds when service cannot be performed on a flight to, within, or from the US. This is very clear language. So this is also very helpful for passengers. And next point, which I would like to even highlight in red, is may airlines and ticket agents retroactively apply refund policies? And the short answer is absolutely not. The department interprets statutory prohibition against unfair deceptive practices to cover actions by airlines and ticket agents applying changes retroactively to their refund policies that affect consumers negatively. So the short version of it is the agents cannot go back on airlines and cannot retroactively change their policies and then say, well, based on this new policy, this is what we are doing. This is a form of deceptive practice and they cannot get away with it. Next question here is, can the airline offer vouchers? And the answer short is, yes, they can, but you don't have to accept it. So, so long as the option of a refund is also offered and clearly disclosed to passenger, that if the passenger is entitled to refund. So basically, yes, they can offer you vouchers, but you don't have to take it, and they cannot impose it on you. And the condition is that they have to clearly tell you that you have a right to a refund. Another interesting question is, how quickly must they refund tickets? For airlines, it is 7 business days if the passenger paid by credit card. It is 20 if they paid cash or check. So on that point too, they have come out here with a strong pro-consumer statement. I'm very pleased with that as well. In terms of their enforcement approach, they are, I think what I'm reading between the lines here is that the DOT is giving a bit of a leeway here in terms of not jumping on the airlines right away. So they are first going to give carriers and ticket agents an opportunity to become compliant, i.e., this is a very, very, very stark warning by the DOT to the airlines, and I suspect that's the reason that we are seeing some refunds now from WestJet, in addition to the public outcry. But that's why WestJet is now refunding tickets to and from the United States, and because they have probably been told by Ms. Workey that they will be in big trouble if they don't. I'm going to look now at some questions. General question, Air Canada changes its refund policy retroactively starting March 19th to not allow refunds in case of flight disruptions. The answer is very simple. Air Canada cannot change its policies retroactively. At least when it comes to the US, the law has been very clear that they cannot do it. Alec is asking, while I know it's pointless to file a complaint with the CTA as they don't seem to have passenger best interest, so a resolve is not likely at all, don't you think it would make a point to have the same volume of complaints received by a CTA as DOT has received? The reason I would not do anything with a CTA and I would stay away from them is because the CTA will try to report cases as resolved. What we have seen is that they are telling passengers that they have no valid cases, their case is going nowhere, and yet they are reporting it as in their annual reports as if they had resolved this case. They will tell Parliament, oh, we have resolved so many cases. They can also try to use it as a basis for trying to issue some additional determinations, and I don't want the CTA anywhere near the rights of passengers who need refunds. There are already a number of class actions, and I would like to see those matters dealt with through an independent judge, judiciary, through a class action where passengers have a chance to have a fair hearing, while with the CTA, clearly they will not have a fair hearing. I would like now, I'm wondering if there are more questions on this document. If not, then I would like to move on and talk about another interesting point that has come up, which is timelines for chargebacks. I would always suggest that you consider 30 days from the date of your flight the time to file a dispute, not because that's what the law says, but rather because that's the safest thing to do, just as a matter of good practice. But what we are going to look now is, I found actually Tom Ruta found some interesting documents, and he shared it with us, which I would like to share with you. This is the official chargeback guide for MasterCard from MasterCard International, and we are going now to go to page 70, and on page 70 we have some guidance on timeframes. Now, when you buy a ticket, you need to remember that a ticket is a case of a delayed delivery of goods and services, and the delivery or performance date is specified by the merchant. You know when your flight is supposed to be. After all, if you don't show up for a flight, it could be a problem under normal circumstances. So in such situations, the timeline under MasterCard International is 120 days of the latest anticipated delivery or performance date specified by the merchant. So don't take it as an encouragement to delay filing a chargeback. I would start a chargeback as soon as possible. But if for some reason you cannot file it right away, or another problem we have seen people run into is that they try to file a chargeback, and then they are being told that they cannot file a chargeback because they purchased a ticket last year. Here's the full answer. It is not the date of the chargeback of the transaction that matters. So even if you bought a ticket in August 2019, that doesn't matter. What matters is that your ticket was for March or April, and your clock starts from the date that you were supposed to be receiving the services, when the merchant promised to deliver the services. I'm going to see how we can post this somehow. I think it has been posted a number of times, but I'm going to look into trying to post it again, because I think this is something important. So I'm just going to take here now a screenshot, and I'm going to try to add it to, in case you haven't seen it yet. Under the word units, we have already a lot of information on credit cards, and probably this should be added there. I'm seeing now a question by Susanna. Is Icelandic Air under European standards? The answer is yes. Iceland is, although not part of the European Union, they are part of the European Economic Area, and it has adopted the Regulation 261 of 2004 of the European Union as its domestic law. So yes, they are bound by the European standards, absolutely. We are approaching now 1 hour. I'm wondering if there are more questions. I would like to tell you a little bit more about fighting chargebacks. This is what we have been doing increasingly. In terms of chargebacks, let's remember it's your money, and when airlines come back to you with some lies, you need to simply state the facts. For example, if they claim that the CTA authorized them to give vouchers, there is a response to it. It's a fraudulent claim, and you need to bring it to the credit card's attention that the airlines are regularly making bogus claims, fraudulent claims, that they weren't flying because of government prohibition, for example. But actually, Olga from this group obtained documentation that Canada never had a prohibition on flights for most destinations. Or they make up another lie that I've seen that blaming that it was actually the passenger canceled, not the airline. Then you provide documentation of the airline canceling and printouts from their website that they announce the cancellation of the flights. It's tedious, it's very aggravating, but you are clearly in the right and they're clearly in the wrong. Ultimately, with Amex, I would like to come back to that point, we are seeing some serious problems with Amex. They seem to be now the most hostile credit card company into chargebacks. We should have a strategy to deal with that. First, perhaps to reach out to them. Next stage may be mass cancellation of Amex cards and also refusing to pay the bill. That's the ultimate technique. If your credit card company is not handling your chargeback properly, you can simply walk away and say, you know what, I'm paying every other thing that of course I owe you, but this is not something I owe you. And if you think I still owe it to you, guess what, take me to court over it. The credit card companies will not want to see tens of thousands of lawsuits. They will have people who cannot pay to begin with. They don't want to go after people who are disputing that they owe money, because that will be very, very cumbersome in courts. So just bear in mind, you are not alone. This group has now, how many members? I'm just was looking the other day. We are now well over 31,000 members. 31,000 members. Look at the petition, how many people signed a petition on the Parliament's website. You are not alone. Of course, it may be scary to go into a fight with a credit card company or a bank when you feel that you're all by yourself, but you aren't. If there are many people, if Amex continues this strategy, we may have a group opened for Amex victims, and we will deal with it. If there are 50, 100 people all having the same problem, all deciding to cancel their cards or deciding to refuse to pay their bill for the charges that they don't recognize, then Amex will have to come up with their strategy, because dealing with 100 consumers is not something they want to across Canada. It creates bad press, it creates problems for them. So I would hope we can avoid it. I would hope that this is just as recently they put it in unfortunate miscommunication. But if they mean it seriously, if they think that they can allow airlines and travel tour operators to keep your money, your hard-earned money, without you getting back actual services, then they're greatly mistaken. I'm going to some questions here. Angelique is asking, my credit card company is stating if I lose my chargeback, they will not represent me in a future claim if airline goes bankrupt. There is no such one-time thing. This has no basis. You can have different chargeback bases on different grounds. You can have a chargeback on the basis of services not received. You can have something on the basis that the merchant went bankrupt. And actually, it's quite clear that if you are given vouchers and then they go bankrupt, you have another chargeback right. But again, it ultimately boils down to the fact that even after the first time, that if they don't give you your money back, just don't pay the bill. This whole system is built on people being, the whole system is built on average Canadians doing as they are being told. Normally it works fine because everybody is playing by the rules, and therefore it creates a system, it creates a civil system. What we are seeing now is a breakdown of the rule of law in some way. We have airlines that are not honoring the law. We may have some financial institutions that are aiding and abetting those airlines to steal your money. So you don't have to pretend that they are acting legally. They are not. And you have to make it abundantly clear that you are not considering their actions legal, and therefore you just don't think that what they are doing is binding upon you. If they want to make it something binding upon you, they can go to a judge, and then they have to explain to the judge, how is it possible that a consumer is getting nothing in return for their hard-earned money? I don't think it's going to fly. Erin Dutka is asking, if you cancel a card, do you have any recourse on travel points? My specific is TD Visa Travel Infinite. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on travel points. I'm sorry. Aleksandra P is asking, if we have a travel package, flight, hotel, meals for a flight from Montreal to Croatia, as that is in Europe, do we have more of a choice to get a refund from Air Transat? Alexandra, with respect to the flight portion, you certainly can also proceed under the European rules, contact the Croatian national enforcement body and ask them to take enforcement action against the Air Transat. With respect to the hotel and other portions, I think chargeback is the best way to proceed. Coney is asking, I'm having problems with chargeback from Costco MasterCard. Anyone else? Called and issued another one over 2 weeks ago and still have never appeared on my credit card. What's next? I'm not sure. Normally, when you are opening a dispute, they have to issue a dispute number. If you got a kind of case number, then with that you can call back and inquire what is going on with my dispute. There may be a simple explanation that they are backlogged. If they are not playing by the rules, you can first try to force them to play by the rules, or it's ultimately refuse to pay the amounts that are not legitimate charges. You, as a consumer, cannot be compelled to pay for something you didn't receive. That's a basic, fundamental rule, and if they want to argue the contrary in court, I think that they will have a hard time doing that. Lorraine is asking, we have yet to be advised if we won our dispute. We are keeping our fingers crossed. Lauren, thank you for your kind words, Lauren. Disputes sometimes take time, and it takes some nerves of steel to deal with it. Just remember, the battle is not over until you have won. You can have setbacks, as we have seen, for example, just this past Friday with the Federal Court of Appeal, judges the decision on the temporary injunction. And you can have some wins, like we have seen with the media attention and what seems like the U.S. Department of Transportation perhaps is gearing up to take enforcement actions against Canadian Airlines that are not following the U.S. law. It may take some time. The U.S. Department of Transport may show some patience, but one thing that we have seen is that our actions, our repeated daily presence in Trudeau's daily updates on social media, and our daily presence and communication to the mainstream media has had its effect, and of course, social media. I'm not sure if you have seen that amazing cartoon that was published in the Chronicle Herald here in Halifax, with and I'm going to maybe try to show it to you, but we can still see that people are listening. Journalists are listening, politicians are listening, even even artists are listening. People understand that what is being done to you passengers, to us passengers, is wrong. That's quite clearly understood. I'm going to try to find that image for you. I'm not sure if I can, but I'm going to try to find that amazing cartoon very quickly for you. So and I think I have it here. I'm right now preparing to show it to you. So this is the cartoon we are talking about. And I think that this sends a message of, okay, the average Canadian is with the passengers. They have no sympathy for those large corporations who have been making extreme profits when the market was good and now are trying to effectively steal the money of passengers. They won't be getting much sympathy. Now a few more questions. Helen is asking, is there a list of countries that airlines were prohibited to fly to? One Air Canada rep said they were prohibited flying to from France except for repatriation flights. With respect to those lists, I would challenge them. Where is the French order prohibiting flying? I would say that Visa made it actually quite clear the burden of proving that is all on the airlines and not on the passengers. In terms of the other questions, let me see. Dean is asking, when requesting a refund, search the changes in your itinerary that's prior to March 19. That's quite true. Air Canada has some kind of legally invalid but imposed policy that somehow if you had some kind of change to your itinerary before March 19th, then they are going to issue you refunds. It's completely arbitrary. It has no basis in law, but if you have such a case, you can maybe get a refund without too much of a fight. Do it, why not? Coney is asking, I'm having problems with chargeback with Costco MasterCard. I think that I already answered Coney's question actually. Coney was asking that she, I think I answered that question actually, team, please. With Costco MasterCard, what you need to do is if you got a credit card dispute number, just use that number to call back and follow up with it. They may be just backlogs. That may be the explanation. I'm seeing here another question by Peter. My flight between Toronto and Australia on June 10th is being cancelled by Air Canada. If I go and dispute the charge with the credit card company, do I still take the voucher if there is no decision by credit card company before my flight? So do not take the vouchers under any circumstance. And if the airline canceled your flight, then there is nothing to worry about. You cannot be a no-show on a flight which is canceled. Just make sure you have proof that the flight is canceled, but then the airline cannot argue that you were a no-show because the flight was canceled. And if you then file a chargeback, then the airline will likely be issuing you a voucher as a way of defending themselves from the chargeback. And of course, you can argue I didn't agree to accept a voucher. So the general response to those disputes is when the airline says, yes, but we gave him a voucher, is I did not agree, nor do I agree to accept vouchers. Those terms and conditions did not exist when I bought a ticket. They are trying to impose conditions retroactively. I don't see many more questions. I see an interesting comment by Miriam about KLM saying that it takes them 10 weeks to issue a refund. I would say after 2 weeks that you have been promised a refund, open a dispute with the credit card company on the basis of services not received and also refund not processed. The airline cannot dictate to you how long it takes them to give you a refund. They cannot keep your money and use it while you need it as well. That's simply absurd. So don't let it happen. Just file a chargeback. I think we are approaching the 75th minute. We're now about 68. In terms of any other question, I see another question. Let me see. Friday's Federal yes, Brenda. Friday's Federal Court of Appeal decision was a disappointment, but who wants to win the battle only to lose the war? Let's win the war. Brenda, I very much agree with you. That's pretty much a sentiment I have as well. Rod is asking, I have a flight with Interjet tonight that I know is canceled, but I have never been informed by either Interjet or Flight Hub. Do I need evidence from them it was canceled? Rod, you don't need an evidence from the airline. If you have evidence, for example, from FlightAware that a flight was canceled, it did not operate, that's perfectly good. You can prove that the flight never took off. There's, same flight number exists up to March, then no other flights, and you have a date on when you made that printout. That's perfect proof the flight did not operate. So don't worry about some of the airlines may try to be somewhat hostile and not provide documentation. Just go around it. I think that we are probably reaching the end of our show today. And one more question. John Smith, If Sunwing put the charge through, am I done with Retta completely if booking cancelled? If Sunwing put through the charge, I would be doing the dispute against Sunwing, and they will have to deal with it. So I would make one good faith attempt always with the merchant to obtain a refund, but if it doesn't work, go to a chargeback. I think that probably this should be the end today. Thank you very much for watching, and we are going to continue to fight this fight. This is not over. It may take a little bit longer, a couple of weeks, couple of months, but ultimately I have faith that passengers, justice, democracy, law and order will prevail. Have a wonderful week. I will see you next weekend.